Hello everyone, I hope y'all are doing well and having a great Saturday night. In tonight's forecast update, we're going to be talking about our multi-day severe weather threat starting pretty much tonight on Saturday and lasting throughout the next several days. And the Storm Prediction Center already has at least a level 2 out of 5 risk for every day all the way up until Wednesday, this upcoming Wednesday. So we'll discuss this weekend and Monday the most in this video, but we'll also briefly discuss our severe weather threats on Tuesday and Wednesday, but those 2 days will be discussed in further detail once we get a little bit closer to that. I will have timestamps up in the video, so feel free to go to any timestamp y'all want to see. But for tonight's video, we'll be mainly talking about tomorrow's severe weather threat on Sunday and Monday's severe weather threat. So once again, just feel free to skip to any timestamp y'all want to see. I should have it labeled off as Saturdays, Sundays, Mondays, severe weather threat, and so on. But we'll go ahead and get started with the update for tonight. So starting out with today's severe weather threat, or tonight's severe weather threat, I should say, for Saturday, March 29th, and we have a slight risk all the way from pretty much Kansas City to the south into southeastern Kansas, Oklahoma, northwestern Arkansas, and then into Texas here, and that includes the Dallas-Fort Worth area, Fort Smith, Fayetteville, and Springfield. Those areas there in the level 2 out of 5 slight risk, and in the green, the dark green color, the level 1 out of 5 marginal risk for severe weather starts into about central Iowa all the way down to the south into central Texas for tonight. And so if we look at our tornado risk here, we just have a 5% tornado risk into central Oklahoma and a 2% risk in the green color all the way from central Missouri into southeastern Kansas, northwestern Arkansas into Oklahoma, and far northern Texas there. Looking at our wind risk for tonight, we have a 15% wind risk all the way from Missouri all the way down into Texas, and a 10% significant wind risk into this area here, and that is in the area with the hatched dashed kind of lines right there. And then we have a 5% wind risk around that all the way from Iowa down to the south into Texas and into these states in between. Finally, looking at our hail risk for tonight, we have a 15% hail risk and 2 separate 10% hatched risk for significant hail in the these areas here, in the hatched areas down into Dallas-Fort Worth area and up into central Oklahoma. And around that, once again, is that 15% risk in the yellow color, and in the brownish color, we have a 5% hail risk all the way from Iowa down to the south into Texas once again, and into those states in between. So just real quick, looking at tonight's risk. And so really starting about right now, we already have some storms into Oklahoma, even into northern Texas, and some clusters of storms into Iowa, even into maybe Missouri. But as we get into the next couple of hours into 12 a.m. Central Daylight Time, those storms will start to head up into northern Oklahoma and southern Kansas and to northern Texas as well. And there you can see our low pressure all the way up into Iowa there. And so as we continue throughout the night into 3 a.m. Central Daylight Time, we have storms all the way up here into Missouri, Kansas, northeastern Oklahoma, even northwestern Arkansas, maybe far extreme northwestern Arkansas by about 3 a.m. Central Daylight Time tomorrow on Sunday. And so those storms will continue to lift off to the northeast into Missouri. And as you get into about 6 a.m. Central Daylight Time tomorrow morning, you will have those storms starting to branch out, and you have somewhat of a kind of line, you could say, here into Missouri by tomorrow morning, but that should start to weaken as you get into tomorrow morning by about 9 and 10 a.m. Central Daylight Time. And then those storms move out, and that'll bring us to our severe weather risk for tomorrow on Sunday. But real quick, we'll look at surface-based CAPE, our instability. And so you have more than enough instability over the next couple of hours into Oklahoma here. Well over 2,000 joules per kilogram of surface-based Cape. That is plenty for those storms to get going there in those areas and support the all hazards threat. And even into Missouri tomorrow morning, 6 and 7 a.m., you have well over 1,000 joules per kilogram of surface-based Cape. Plenty of storm fuel for those storms to produce once again hail and damaging winds. But that'll be pretty much it for our discussion of the Saturday night severe weather risk. Now looking at our severe weather threat for tomorrow, Sunday, March the 30th, and we already have a level 3 out of 5 risk of severe weather, an enhanced risk all the way from southern Michigan to the south into portions of the Ohio Valley and upper south. And so around that, and around the orange color, around that is a level 2 out of 5 slight risk in the yellow color once again. And that is pretty much from central Michigan to the south into, once again, the Ohio Valley, all the way down into portions of the deep south. And then in the dark green color, that is a level 1 out of 5 severe weather risk, all the way from portions of the Great Lakes states down to the south into portions of, once again, the Ohio Valley down to the south into the deep south. And we have a level 1 out of 5 marginal risk here into southeastern Georgia and the eastern Florida Peninsula for tomorrow as well. And so that is our risk for tomorrow. And now looking at our tornado risk here, we do have a 10% tornado risk in this area here, and then we have a 10% significant tornado risk into the entire 10% risk, and that means that we could see there is a 10% risk of significant tornadoes happening into the area here in that yellow color with the hatched lines. And so around that in the brown color is a 5% tornado risk all the way from southern Michigan down to the south into the surrounding states and all the way down into Louisiana and Mississippi. Around that in the dark green color is a 2% tornado risk all the way starting into Michigan down to the south into the states in between, all the way to the south into Louisiana and Mississippi. Then looking at our wind risk, we have a large 30% risk of damaging winds. And once again, a hatch risk into these areas here for those winds being significant damaging winds, into these areas here. And then into the yellow color, we have a 15% wind risk all the way from Michigan down to the south into those states in between for tomorrow. And then looking at our risk around that is a 5% wind risk starting into Michigan, the Great Lakes states, all the way to the south, once again into the deep south. And we have a 5% wind risk down here into Georgia and Florida as well for tomorrow. And then finally looking at our hail risk here, we have a 30% hail risk into these states here, into Illinois and Indiana, down to the southwest, into Arkansas, Oklahoma, Texas. And once again, a 10% significant risk has been issued for the entire 30% risk, which means a 10% risk of the hail being significant hail occurring into these areas. And then in the yellow color, we have a 15% risk starting into Michigan, once again, all the way down to the south into the states in between to Mississippi, Louisiana, Texas. And we have a hatch risk into portions of that 15% risk for tomorrow of 10% risk for significant hail into that area. And then we have lastly our 5% hail risk all the way from Michigan again down to the south into the states in between down to the deep south. And then we also have a 5% hail risk into southeastern Georgia and the eastern Florida Peninsula for tomorrow on Sunday. So now starting out with the HRRR weather model for tomorrow on Sunday, and we'll be looking at the 0Z run. So if we start out with, we'll go to around We'll go to around 11. We'll go to 12 p.m. tomorrow on Sunday, Central Daylight Time. And so, as you can see into some of these areas, actually, let me zoom in here to some of our sectors so we can look at it a little bit better. We'll go to our north central U.S. sector, and so as you can see into Illinois, Missouri, you already have storms beginning to form into those areas, and we'll actually just stay on this sector just for a second, and then we'll move farther down to the south so we can see that as well. But by about 1 o'clock, 1 p.m. Central Daylight Time tomorrow on Sunday, you have those storms beginning to form into Illinois, Indiana, and so once again, all hazards threat is possible with these storms. You already have a 30 and 40 knot low level jet into these areas that is going to be promoting that tornado risk for tomorrow. And then as you get farther into the day, by about 6 p.m. Central Daylight Time, you have this long line of storms stretching all the way from Michigan into Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio. And that'll be responsible for that wind risk as well. But still, the risk for hail and tornadoes will be possible with this line. And so you get that going even further into 10 p.m. Central Daylight Time. You have a pretty long line of storms here, all the way from the Great Lakes to the south into Kentucky by this point. And that will continue throughout the day, the evening, I should say. And so if you look at our low-level jet, you still have a pretty strong low-level jet into these areas and even into Ohio as well. A 40 to 50 knot low-level jet, even almost 60 knot low-level jet in some of these areas. If you look at instability, here you have plenty of instability tomorrow afternoon into Indiana, Ohio, even Michigan as well, and further down in the south, and we'll discuss that in just one moment. But still, plenty of instability for these storms, and that will once again promote that all hazards threat for these areas tomorrow. So if we continue that on, those storms continue to move east, and you have plenty of coverage and just this pretty long line of storms all the way into Pennsylvania to the south, into Kentucky by about 12 and 1 a.m. by Monday morning by this point, tomorrow night into Monday morning. And so you have not plenty, but still have some instability into these areas, and you will have, once again, that low level jet hanging around well into the overnight hours for these areas. And so we'll have to continue to watch these areas here, especially tomorrow afternoon. I would say definitely across Illinois, Indiana, once we get these semi-discrete storms beginning to form. And then once that line starts to develop by tomorrow afternoon across the Ohio Valley and upper south, we'll have to watch for the damaging wind risk. And so that'll be really about it for up here. And then if we move down to the south, really to the southeast, go a little bit farther back here. So we'll start out with around 10 a.m. Central Daylight Time, and then we'll get a little bit further here. And still, you can see those storms beginning to develop into the Ohio Valley way up here. And then if you look further to the south, you'll still have storms beginning to develop even by 11 a.m. Central Daylight Time and even 12 p.m. Central Daylight Time tomorrow. And if you look at our instability here, our surface-based cape, you have just absurd amounts of instability into some of these areas, into Tennessee, Arkansas, Mississippi, Louisiana, Texas, but mainly in these areas here where we need to watch into the deep south, upper south, all the way up into the Ohio Valley. But really, some of these areas could see well over 3,000 joules per kilogram of surface-based cape. That is plenty for these storms to develop. But we continue this on here. We get a little bit further, and I would say we really won't see I wouldn't say really, but we'll see most of our main storms we'll have to watch well into, I would say, 4 p.m. Central Daylight Time, further to the south, even into Tennessee, Arkansas, and then still down here into the Panhandle of Florida as well. And then let me back this up a little bit here. So if we go to about 1 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, you do have those storms down here into southeastern Georgia and the peninsula of Florida, and then those will start to move off really by 5 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, and those storms will once again be able to produce some damaging winds and potentially hail, but most of those should move off by tomorrow evening for the most part, but still some storms could linger. And then if we kind of go back here, I know I'm jumping around, but if we go back here to 5 p.m. Central Daylight Time tomorrow on Sunday, you still could have plenty of those storms trying to develop here into Arkansas, Mississippi, Louisiana, and still you have that line all the way up into Ohio Valley tomorrow evening. And then as you get into about 9 p.m. Central Daylight Time, you have plenty of instability into these areas here, and you have somewhat of a low-level jet into Mississippi, Tennessee, still a pretty strong low-level jet into Kentucky and northward. And that tries to hang around a little bit on the HRRR, but then as you get into late tomorrow night into even Monday, you have a pretty long, kind of stretched out line of storms trying to develop, and you have plenty of instability here and plenty of forcing for those storms to develop. And once again, you'll have an all hazards threat, for these areas. And so that pretty much leads us to our Monday severe weather threat. But if we take a look at our broader view here, plenty of instability will be in place for these storms. If you look at our dew points for tomorrow, especially into the Ohio Valley, I really do think we'll have to watch these areas tomorrow. And I think I feel like there might be a chance for a introduction of a moderate risk, but I don't want to say that for sure. I think it's possible into the Ohio Valley, more into these areas rather than further to the south, but I could be wrong about that for sure. But dew points well into the 60s into the Ohio Valley tomorrow on Sunday, and to the south, the dew points hitting the lower 70s in some areas, and that is well moist enough for these storms for Sunday to develop. So this moist sector will be somewhat broad, and just deep moisture, rich moisture down here into the deep south will help to aid those storms in development, and really allows for the environment to become unstable enough for these storms to develop really tomorrow evening and tomorrow night across the areas of the deep south, but well up to the north by tomorrow afternoon and even tomorrow late tomorrow morning. But really that'll be about it for our Sunday severe weather discussion. But please continue to stay weather aware tomorrow if you live in these areas that will be impacted by the severe weather risk. And now finally looking at Monday's severe weather risk, and this will be on March the 31st. And so we already have a level 2 out of 5 slight risk all the way from New York State down to the south into the mid-Atlantic, southeast, and all the way into the deep south for Monday in the yellow color there. And so I do think we'll see a introduction of an enhanced risk at some point. I'm not really too sure about what areas, just because there still is some uncertainty with the models at this range. But we do have a level 1 out of 5 marginal risk around that slight risk, all the way even into Vermont, New York State, down to the southwest and to the states in between, all the way into Louisiana and the northern Florida peninsula for Monday. And so we do not have any tornado, hail, or wind risk issued at this time, just because the Storm Prediction Center does not issue those at the day 3 range as I'm recording this video. But that'll be our severe weather risk for Monday, March 31st. So just real quick, looking at Monday's severe weather threat. And so you're going to have dew points well into the 60s into the southeast and deep south, while even up to the mid-Atlantic and even New York State. Some areas could see maybe right around 60 degrees for our dew points, but much of these areas to the south, I would say Virginia point south, will see dew points into the 60s. And so that'll be sufficient enough for these severe storms for Monday. So if you look at the European real quick, you do have, I think you will have somewhat of a line of storms. That line will kind of continue, that starts into the deep south and will somewhat shift to the east on Monday. And so I think well up here into the mid-Atlantic, you could see some more maybe isolated storms, I would say, if any get going out ahead of this line. But really, if you get that line getting stronger to the south, and that will really kind of not pinch off, but lessen the moisture, I would say, up to the north if you get a stronger line to the south and allow that cold front to kind of, well, actually, yeah, pinch off your moisture is I guess that's what I'm trying to say. But you will have just a little bit of a low level jet as you get into Monday evening across even Georgia and Alabama, even up here into Maryland and Virginia, and we'll have to watch that for sure just a little bit, and maybe even into Monday evening, Monday night, you could see a low level jet there, somewhat strong low level jet across the Carolinas and Virginia. But we'll still have to continue to watch this. I'm going to look at this a little bit more with our short range models once we get to that point. But we're really not in range for any short range models that I'm really comfortable looking at, just because there's still quite a bit of uncertainty at this range. Still with the GFS, the same idea is there with the moisture all the way up into New York State, Pennsylvania, and then to the south as well, into the deep south, southeast, dew points into the 60s, into some of those areas. So we'll have to watch that for Monday, but that'll be really about it for our discussion of Monday's severe weather threat. And then for Tuesday, April 1st, we have a slight risk, a level 2 out of 5. Risk for severe weather already issued by the Storm Prediction Center into southeastern Nebraska, central and southwestern Iowa, really northwestern Missouri, and northeastern Kansas for once again on Tuesday for that risk. And so if we move on to day 5 on Wednesday, April the 2nd, the Storm Prediction Center already has a level 3 out of 5 level 3 out of 5 enhanced risk for severe weather into these areas here, and that is a 30% risk at this range, but a 30% risk is equivalent to a level 3 out of 5 enhanced risk. And so the Storm Prediction Center is pretty confident in another severe weather event across these areas, almost the same as what we're about to see tomorrow on Sunday. But we do have that enhanced risk all the way from Indiana and Ohio, all the way to the southwest into Arkansas and into those states in between. And then a level 2 out of 5 slight risk in the yellow color, all the way from Michigan down to the south, really southward into those states in between, all the way down into Louisiana and Texas, once again for Wednesday, April the 2nd. So if we look at the latest 18Z European weather model, and then we'll look at the GFS just real quick, but the latest European will also show let me go back a little bit here, show a 984 millibar low pressure into Kansas, northern Kansas by Tuesday afternoon, and then you could see some storms beginning to develop into Iowa and Missouri by this point. And if we look and continue this here, you still will have plenty of storms starting to develop into southeastern Nebraska, northeastern Kansas, northwestern Missouri, into central and southwestern Iowa by Tuesday evening into Tuesday night. You continue that on, and then you'll have a kind of a line of storm, a line of storms develop, into these areas on Wednesday, and then Wednesday you'll have once again that broad area, that broad enhanced risk already issued for these areas into the Ohio Valley and Midwest receive that severe weather, and so you could see that severe weather risk into Wednesday, even into Wednesday morning, but especially Wednesday afternoon and Wednesday evening across these areas. And that'll get going there. And so this is going to be the day we'll definitely have to continue to watch, because I think this could be a pretty significant day for severe weather. But that system continues on to the east, and we could see maybe some more severe weather on Thursday across maybe some areas of the south central U.S. and southeast. But I don't think we'll have anything as extreme as Wednesday's severe weather threat for the few days after. But after that, we'll continue to watch and see what happens as we get into late week into next weekend. But if we look at the European real quick, Tuesday night into Wednesday is definitely going to be the period we'll have to watch. If you look here on Tuesday night across the central U.S., you already have a 60 and 70 knot level jet across these areas. And if you look at we don't have instability with the European on this website, but we'll look at the GFS in just a second. But even as you get into late Tuesday night into early on Wednesday across Kansas, Missouri, Oklahoma, these areas could see almost a mid 70 knot level jet into these areas, and that is extremely strong in the low levels. Continuing that on into Wednesday, even as you get into Wednesday evening and Wednesday afternoon, Wednesday evening, you still could see a broad low level jet into these areas, still a upper 50 to even lower 60 knot low level jet into these areas on Wednesday across quite a bit of the Ohio Valley, deep south, even into the upper south for Wednesday. And so that will just do nothing but enhance that severe weather potential again. And so for both of these days, for Tuesday and Wednesday, you'll have a all hazards threat of severe weather that includes damaging winds, hail, and tornadoes for those days. And so lastly, if we look at our dew points into these areas, especially we go to Tuesday afternoon and Tuesday evening, and across portions of the central U.S., you'll have dew points into the low 60s across Oklahoma and Kansas. And then if you continue that on to Wednesday, you have a once again pretty broad warm sector, dew points well into the 60s into some of these areas for Wednesday, and that will once again enhance that severe weather risk. If we look at the GFS real quick, same thing here, pretty similar setup. If we look at our instability, especially Tuesday night into Kansas, Oklahoma, if you look at our low level jet as well with that, just an absolute insane, pretty strong low level jet into these areas. That's really all I can say. Especially overlapped with instability. That's just not really good to see at this range. And then if you look at our winds well up into the atmosphere, high up into the atmosphere, you still have a pretty strong upper level jet in these areas for Tuesday night into Wednesday. So we'll have to consider that as well. But looking at instability for Wednesday, just real quick here on the GFS, still plenty of instability into these areas, into the central U.S. for Wednesday. And the all hazards threat will be possible for Tuesday and Wednesday for sure, but that'll be about it for our discussion for Tuesday and Wednesday. So that'll be it for tonight's forecast update. I appreciate all of y'all watching, and I do apologize for kind of the sloppiness of the video towards the really second half. It's just been a while since I've done a video this long, a 30-minute video that is, and I'm just not used to doing the. But I really do appreciate all of y'all watching, and my pacing was a little bit off with this video. I kind of spent a little bit too much time, not really too much time, but I spent a little bit more time than I wanted to on the severe weather threat for Tuesday and Wednesday, but that is just as important. But I would have liked to have spent a little bit more time on tomorrow's and Monday's severe weather threat, but we just really couldn't really look at Monday's threat in a lot more detail just because we don't have any of these short range models to the point where I like to use them where it's accurate. But again, we'll continue to watch these threats over the next several days, and I don't know when the next time I'll have a video out, but hopefully I'll have one out for sure by maybe Monday. If not, then I'll have one out by Tuesday, covering those severe weather threats. But again, I appreciate all of y'all watching, and I hope y'all have a great weekend.